Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership Is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis Gianoutsos. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership Is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
I am hailing from Los Angeles, and it's a beautiful day as always. Can't complain. Sometimes I still do.
Very good. And are you originally from the US? Have you been always your life in the US?
Yeah, I grew up in Colorado and moved out to LA about, it's hard to say, but I think about 20 years ago. Those have been my primary locations and backgrounds.
Yep. Okay. And I understand from your career-wise, you've built your career as an executive around both sides of the coast of the US, by the sounds of it, in integrated marketing and communications agencies and so forth, and building that. What has it been like? Is communication and marketing different on each side of the coast of the United States?
It can be. It all depends on what you're after. I was an executive for an integrated marketing PR firm for a number of years, almost 15. And we had offices on the West Coast and the East Coast. I think the biggest difference was East Coast was primarily finance driven, whereas West Coast is primarily consumer driven. But there was always this B2B mix that kind of transcended any sort of geography.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, cool. So that's awesome. And tell me something else. I think do you follow any sports in the US or around the world?
I'm one of the few that doesn't in LA. I'm really interested in media, and I guess you would call it the nerd culture. I'm big into comics and movies and things like that, games.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and tell us a little bit more about your background. Is there anything else you want to share that we haven't already shared so far with the listeners?
Yeah, I have, I think, an interesting background. I was basically outside of the comms world when I started with the agency, and then I grew up into an executive position, and then since then started my own practice. And so I think I have an interesting point of view, because one of the reasons that I ended up making that change into my own practice is because I'm seeing a lot of antiquated points of view and mindsets in the agency environment, but also in the corporate environment. And so it's very difficult to actually reach good business goals because we are all using old tech, basically. And so I wanted to start my own way so I could be more frank and integrated with the clients that I work with, have a better impact, both on their business goals, but on the world, on the community. And so it was an interesting journey, and just being disillusioned with the whole industry and having to move into another world, basically, to navigate that.
Yeah, and those mindsets, interesting, and having to navigate it. Wow. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we get into this, because as we said, leadership is changing. That's what we're going to talk about. How did you get into leadership?
I grew into leadership through the agency environment, leading bi-coastal teams and actually doing a lot of administrative, operational kinds of stuff, while also doing business development. I had to wear a lot of hats. We were always joking about constantly being a startup mode for the last 15 years. But that was my role. But as I pivoted into my own practice, I actually started working with leaders, in particular, tackling communications and marketing problems from the point of view of leadership and industry leadership. And so I actually work with executives, communications teams, and clients in general, just on positioning themselves as leaders in the marketplace as an approach. And that's where I landed and where I am now.
Yeah, very good. I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you there around this, what you just shared. One is really around, what was the transition like for you from working with Fortune 500 companies, corporate world, to transition into your own business now? What was that transition like for you?
It was startling, just to put a word on it. But what was startling about it was that the realization that the corporate structure is just built with a framework of bottlenecks, where everybody's getting in the way of everybody else, even though they have a shared goal and intention. And when I got out of that structure, I was startled about how quickly and efficiently and functionally efficient everything worked, and therefore how much more effective everything was. Everything from meetings to just what I'm doing on a Saturday afternoon, all of that works so much better without that corporate structure.
It's amazing how, and I really love what you just shared there about the fact that in the corporate world, a framework of bottlenecks. It is so true, right? There's so many bottlenecks. And I sit there as well, Mark, and I go, what the heck are they doing here? And how much money's being wasted and spent here? And what are we doing? And where's the results? Where's the outcomes? Oh, but it was a great meeting. And I'm like, really? Yes, I think, I don't know what your thoughts are there and about what organizations should be doing to get rid of those bottlenecks. What do you think?
I think the biggest challenge is that the goals are typically not aligned. And so why are we having this meeting? Has that been defined? Just talking practically, but organizationally, what are we doing here? What is the point of this business? And what is my role? If you don't know the point of the organization, then how are you supposed to know your role? And how are you supposed to know what your goals and objectives are? And so I think that the way businesses can dismantle some of those bottlenecks is simply by aligning around what we're after and what we're trying to do as an organization. And that has to be something bigger than profit. It has to be something that actually is trying to impact the world of the businesses in a positive way. And otherwise, there's no point in doing it.
Profit's profit. That's all very nice. But then if it doesn't have meaning behind it, the value, and as you said, the impact, then what's the point in doing it? And I agree with you. I think the aligning pace is really important. I ask execs that I coach as well, how many meetings are you going to? I'm going to all these meetings and so forth. And I go, okay, but do you actually understand the purpose of the meeting? No. And I'm like, you've got to ask that question. What's the purpose? Otherwise, why go? I think it's...
I had a talk with a client just this before we started talking about this. So we have a standing meeting and I'm saying, okay, the purpose of this meeting is to look at what was done and then what we're going to do and whether or not what we are going to do happened, why it failed. And that's an email. We don't need to get a CEO to spend 20 minutes talking about what was done and what wasn't. We need to get a CEO to get their insight strategically on what we should be doing or to get their buy-in or whatever. But too many meetings just in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was one thing. And the second thing, that, based on what you said earlier, was about you helping leaders and that around, it's more or less like their brand, if I want to put it, I'm going to say it that way. You tell me if that's right or wrong. But I think the thing here is that you're helping people understand their place in the market is what you think you're saying and so forth. So how important is it for them to understand where they stand in the market, what they offer in the market, and about their own branding? How important is this?
I think it's critical. However, at a caveat is that we tend to focus on the wrong thing when it comes to my place in the market. I would argue most organizations focus on what they deliver to the market and why that's interesting or important, features and benefits. What is the thing? How does that benefit the audience? And I think everybody does that. That's table stakes, I suppose. You have to do that to some extent, but nobody's talking about why are we doing this to begin with, and why. And really what ends up happening when you start asking those questions is what you're looking externally now. You're not looking inside the organization and saying, our widget does this thing. Our widget can open wine better than any other wine opener that's ever been invented. But then you have to ask, why is that important to the people we're talking to? That's important because now you can get your evening back and you can have that date with your partner. And that's a value statement. And that's, I think if we use the value that you bring to the world as your communications platform, then suddenly you are automatically positioned in the marketplace. You automatically have differentiation because your competitors are probably not thinking like that. That's how Nike think. That's how Dawn soap thinks. That's how, Mars Candy thinks, but that's not how businesses in the mid-market or even in the Fortune 500.
Now, whereabouts in the world are you today?
So I live right outside of New York City in central New Jersey. Although if you ask me a question, I always tell people I'm a New Yorker because once you're born there, grow up there, I'm just a New Yorker living in the suburbs.
Ah, that's cool. Very cool. You're in New York. I'm in New Zealand. And so we've got the news, New York, New Zealand. We've got both us here. And we're underway. And so you are the Global Chief Commercial Officer at MindMaze. And what I'd like you to do is just tell our listeners a little bit about that organization, what you do, but also, is there anything about your background you might like to share with us?
So my background is very eclectic. And I think anybody's journey, if you sometimes just go with the flow, it can be a little eclectic. So I am the only person in my family to go to college. So I went to college, State University in New York. It was not on anybody's blueprint. My parents never even thought about college. My two brothers didn't go to college, but I was bound and determined. So I went to one of the state universities in New York because really that's all I could afford. So I went there to undergraduate school, studied economics, came home and decided that I was going to try my spin at Wall Street, because anybody who grows up in New York City stares at the big city, thinks that they want to be in finance. I did actually go work on Wall Street, down Water Street to be specific, but worked down there for one of the large financial firms. And then I realized that it was very difficult. I didn't have the right connections, family connections, to make it at that time, because this is many years ago and it was a different structured industry at that point in time. And so I decided I was going to have to be different. I had the luck of having a friend who was a couple years older than me, who made a suggestion that I apply to UPS's management training program, which is United Parcel Service, is a global company. They're in transportation and logistics. She said the only thing was I was going to have to drive a truck in New York City as part of their management training program. And was I going to be okay with that? And I was young and stupid. And I said, sure, no problem. I will do that, which I did. So I left Wall Street. I was at Lehman Brothers at the time. I left there. And really it was, you have to decide at some point, even when you're young, if they don't let you follow the path that you want to take, you have to make that bold decision to take a different path. And no matter what, you don't know what that's going to be. I just decided that no matter what, nobody would look at me the same if I drove a truck in Manhattan. So I was going to roll the dice and do it. I will not say I was a very good driver. I stunk at it. And of course, the UPS, my first day on the job, made me go deliver a package back to my old office, which of course was humiliating. But I did it, smiled and kept going. Did that for a number of years, wound up starting up their logistics business, which was helping people rebuild factories and do plans and all that kind of fun stuff. But the point of that was it was a springboard, and I wound up just rolling the dice again. After that, decided I didn't want to stay in transportation and logistics, so I went to work in pharmaceuticals, selling, because I had worked as a pharmacy tech during the summers. Was not a pharmacist, just figured I knew enough and was not afraid. So I did that. Then I applied to grad school and actually had to find a job that was going to let me take classes during the week. So I wound up getting into startups, and startups are wild. I worked in AI for cancer detection before it was even a thing, before clouds existed and all of that. And it was using neural nets to detect abnormal cells in a way that the human eye could not detect them. And it was so much fun, but you went through the IPO process and success and failures and acquisitions and all of that. I decided then I needed some stability in my life. And I wound up going back into pharmaceuticals for a company called Novo Nordisk, and actually then spent 18 years at Novo Nordisk working my way through that. Came in as a regional director, running a team, and then just worked my way up through different parts of that commercial organization in all aspects of healthcare and biotech and pharmaceuticals. So having led sales teams, small teams, then bigger teams, then bigger teams, then pitching new businesses to the company, being shocked when they gave me money to start it up. I got $18 million seed money for them to start a new business unit within the company, and wound up with the whole kit and caboodle, with a sales team, a field force, an operations team, a marketing team. But then got the bump, like many people did in a company when a CEO changes, got bumped out with the old regime. And then I had to start all over again and figure out what I wanted to be. And then I decided that no matter what, I was not going to do the same thing again. So I worked with boards in kind of the executive search arena for helping people set up boards and other high-level things, because I knew a lot about executive leaders at that point in time. And then I got pulled back into digital health through somebody I knew who thought I would be a perfect fit for a new digital healthcare company that needed to understand how pharma companies were organized. And I knew that, quite frankly, I didn't know anything about digital health. I was not an expert, but I was an expert at the inside workings of a pharma and biotech company. So I used that platform to learn that side of the business and have been in it ever since.
Wow.
Worked for a company called Huma, which I still am an advisor and admire that company. So I stayed on as an advisor for them, but then stepped over to MindMaze to lead their global initiative for their go-to-market strategy.
And I understand that's around neurotechnology and digital therapeutics. Is that right?
Yeah, it's really about unlocking the brain's potential to repair, to restore itself, and to maximize performance, whether that be a patient who has a stroke, who has an incident, and you help the body repair itself, and then also try to maximize that performance of that patient. But it can be used on anything from patients to athletes. So we do things with stroke patients, Parkinson's, MS, and also we work with Formula One racers.
Ah, very good.
Some fun
Yeah.
stuff in there. Science
Yeah.
has its positives, even in sports.
Formula One races. Yeah, I actually was in Dallas prior to Michael Schumacher having his issue or incident, and I saw him and I was like, oh, I should get a photo with him. And I thought, oh no, leave him alone, the poor guy. Probably gets asked everyone. And then after that's when he had his accident. It's like, oh no. Yeah, and you know what? I was telling you before about the tumor that I had, and when I had that removed, the doctor said to me that because it was on the nerve of the vocal cord, and he said to me it was munted, but the brain will work it out. And the brain is such a fantastic, amazing kind of tool, I call it, or machine, that is really amazing to see what it does. And what you're working on, and the team, sounds very exciting. Now, when you talked about the pieces around going into different leadership roles, what sort of got you into leadership?
So for me on leadership, I had started out in sales, medical sales and others. And of course, it's not the greatest criteria for leadership, but if you have really good sales results, what do? They promote you to run a sales team. So that's exactly what happened. I feel so sorry for the first team I probably led because I was probably not a very good leader. Maybe if you were my friend, I was a good friend in leadership, but I didn't know the first thing about what I was doing. And for women, often we take charge by force a little bit because that's what we've been taught along the way. And it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. It took me years of kind of thinking about, I don't like the way this feels, that I changed my style and adapted along the way. But I was still very successful. So if you're successful, by hook or by crook, they keep promoting you and you keep getting more and more responsibility. And yet somewhere you have to hope that person in leadership has self-awareness to figure out that they need to evolve themselves. And I'm a work in progress to this day.
Yeah, and I think we all are. That's the thing. We are learning all the time. But it's interesting how they look for somebody who does really well, and then they go, oh, we need a leader, and they look around. Oh, sure do. Great. Congratulations. Good luck. See you in 12 months' time, your performance review. And for some of them, they struggle. They've not had that development in the past to bring them up through the ranks or even just give them some development full stop, which is always sometimes a little bit hard. Now, I see also that you're with your husband a little bit interested in boating and fishing.
I do. I think everybody's got to be balanced, right? You can't be all work and no play. So I do like to boat. I like to do deep sea fishing. I'm not afraid to touch the muck, as they would say, and bait my own hooks and the rest of it. So I do everything from like small fishing for fluke, flounder, to love to go out shark fishing, and you name it, I'll do a little bit of everything.
But you need to come to New Zealand. It's just the land weird. Well, there's so much fishing around here. You need to come one day.
I
check
do.
it out.
I can't wait to come to New Zealand. I look forward to it. We need to do some clinical trials there so I can go with the company too and help. I know you had your borders locked for a long point in time, but now things are opening up and I can travel again.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.